Welcome back, Canes family, to the Storm Tracker podcast, tracking the storm that is the Miami Hurricanes, here for canescounty.com, part of the rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Scouting the opponent, Wake Forest, today, where we kind of dive into Miami's opponent this week, the Demon Deacons. It's senior day, last home game for the Miami Hurricanes this year. And it's a must win for the Hurricanes as they need to win their last two games to get to the ACC title game. Wake also has something on the line. They would need to win their last two games to become bowl eligible. And here with me to talk about it all is Conor O'Neil, who writes for Wake Forest rivals, Deacons Illustrated. Thanks for joining me today, Conor.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Marcus. Good to be back. I felt like I just did this a couple days ago.
Right, you're a busy guy. You cover Duke and Wake Forest. I don't know how you do that. Being a publisher for one site seems like a tall task for me. But yeah, you get this done, especially with basketball season now in full swing. I'm sure you're a busy guy. So thanks for joining me today to talk a little bit of the Hurricanes and the Demon Deacons. First, I want to get a sense from you, Conor, about the program, Wake Forest, them coming into this game. When you look at their scores, they kind of battled for most of their games this season. Got blown out a couple of times this season, but this seems like a team that Miami should definitely not sleep on here because they can beat you if you are slipping or sleeping. So just what's the sense around the program going into this game down in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, not to be too sarcastic, but vibes have been better for Wake Forest. Like they've been in better spots and not too long ago. I mean, this is a program that in 2021 they were in Charlotte playing Pitt for the ACC championship, but they've slipped. There's no other way around it. There's no sugarcoating it. And really 3 or 4 weeks ago it was a different story. They won 2 road games to get to 4-4. They weren't the prettiest of wins, and they weren't against the best teams. Like they went to UConn and they went to Stanford and picked up wins. So they were 4-4 going into an off week and had a home game against Cal that was a 10-point loss. It's one of those fluky ones where it looks like a multi-possession loss, but it was a 3-point game with less than 2 minutes left, and Wake had the ball and was in position to go down and either take a lead or tie the game. And Hank Bachmeier threw an interception late, and Cal scored a late touchdown. And then the Carolina game, they never let Wake's only lead was like 3-0, I think. But the quarterback gets hurt. In the first play in the second half, Hank Bachmeier goes out. Their backup comes in and leads them down the field and scores a touchdown. They tie the game at 10-10, and then it just slipped away. And so they've really – all of the momentum that they had from getting 2 road wins and getting to 4-4, looking at the back half of the schedule or back third of the schedule and thinking, man, this is a team that could win – 6 or 7 games. This is the one that everybody looks at on the schedule and says there's not much of a chance. And all their momentum's just evaporated over the last 2 weeks. And they're in backs against the wall mode right now. I don't know that this is the game you want to have your back against the wall, but it is what it is. And there's at least some confidence that because Miami has not really blown out that many ACC teams, like they've let some teams hang around. Wake feels what the optimistic hope on Wake's side is that they can also hang around and be in a game, and it's another shot for them to correct some of their mistakes in these late game situations.
Yeah, let's talk about those late game situations, because when I look up and down at their scores, it seems like they were in close games or one score games towards the end of the game. 3-point win over Stanford, like you mentioned, 10-point loss to Cal, a touchdown loss to North Carolina. Of course, they did get blown out by Clemson. One possession game win over NC State. Also got blown out by Ole Miss as well. But when you look at that, Ole Miss, Clemson, those are the two teams that I guess maybe closely mirror what Miami can do, especially offensively, when it comes to those two teams. But when it comes to these close games, when you watched Wake, what has prevented this team from kind of getting over the hump to turn those losses into wins?
It's kind of the most frustrating part of what Dave Clawson's job is right now is when Wake had their program clicking at a high level, or as pretty much as high as it's ever been in the program's history for as long of a period as it was. When you talk about going to bowls between 2016 and 2022, they were one of the least penalized teams in the ACC every single season. I think it would have been a 7-year stretch. They had 1 year where they had a negative turnover differential. You could always count on them protecting the ball, and whether the defense was forcing turnovers or not, they'd still always have a positive margin because they just wouldn't give other teams the ball. Last year and this year, it's just a completely different story. I mean, they commit turnovers. They shoot themselves in the foot with penalties. I mean, there was even a face mask penalty on a wide receiver trying to block a guy on the outside last week. They just, it's not like it's. I was going to say it's not like there's late hits and they're undisciplined, but there was a late hit against Carolina out of bounds. I thought it was a little iffy. The guy was still kind of in bounds, but neither here nor there. They're just they make mental mistakes that they did not make when this program was going to bowl games and when they were competitive in the top half of the ACC. And I mean, I was in the press conference yesterday with Dave Clawson, and it's the obvious question, and he only has one way to answer it. But it's just like, can this be fixed with 2 games left in the season, or is this just something that you've got to get into the off season, get into the spring, drill it again, teach it differently, and try to fix it for next year? And I mean, they're going to try to fix it for this game. They have to. Not like they can just keep doing the same stuff and expect to beat a team of Miami's caliber. I mean, if you can't beat a team of Cal or Carolina's caliber, then you certainly can't beat Miami when you're making those types of mistakes. So we'll see if they can fix it. I'm skeptical, but I mean, it is something that, like, they were so good at it for so long. It's hard to believe that they could just fall off a cliff and stay off the cliff, because really the falling off the cliff happened last year. That's just more of a continuation into this season.
Yeah, it kind of sounds a little bit about Miami as well when it comes to the defense. I think a lot of the fans here are wondering if it's ever going to get fixed as far as the defense is concerned. And there's the question of, is just this who they are, and I think that's basically what you're saying as well about Wake. Is this just who they are? Is this just the 2024 version of the Demon Deacons and the Hurricanes? And it seems like with attrition and just with the personnel that you have, there's not much that you could probably fix at this point. You just gotta go out there and try to execute to the best of your ability here. So we'll see how both teams kind of execute in these last 2 games, as they're both critical for both programs. There's been a lot of talk about the offense, Conor, and just its uniqueness, I guess you could say. Can you talk a little bit about this offense that Wake runs, and do you feel like it's something that is a strategy that works? or is it something that probably needs to be thrown away?
Yeah, I don't know about thrown away. I do have my questions about its sustainability and whether it's been kind of figured out. I, I maybe it might be I might be a prisoner of having watched it so often and watched it when it was successful and now it's not successful, so you want to change it. Um, Dave Clawson always says something about his evaluation process is a lot of, is it what we're doing or who we're doing it with? And I think the way they see it is it's more of who they're doing it with. And so I don't think they're going to have any wholesale changes without, getting a new offensive coordinator or having a new coach. I do think that you'll see a lot less slow mesh against Miami than a typical than you would a typical ACC team, just because, man, I know enough about Miami's front four that the problem with the slow mesh is when you play defensive tackles that are NFL bound, you can't run that very well. Like they're going to blow up the slow mesh. They're going to disrupt the timing of the play, and it is a timing play. So, like the highlights going right now of this Clemson team. This is a Clemson team that had 2 NFL defensive tackles, and honestly, I was shocked for that whole game that Wake was able to be successful moving the ball because of how good their defensive tackles were, and that was kind of the last straw of Wake's offensive. I don't know if you want to call it a golden age, but I mean, ever since that Clemson game, they've been searching offensively. It feels like. I mean, they had a couple late in the 2022 season where they still moved the ball well, but man, for the most part, their offense struggled all of last year. It's been a little better this year, but still, I mean, they did not move the ball very well against Clemson. They did not move the ball very well against Ole Miss. Those are the two contemporaries with Miami, and Miami might have a worse defense than those two, but Miami still has the 5-star and the 4-star players and athletes. I don't know if Clemson has anybody like Simeon Barrow. He was, to me, the most impressive player on that Miami defensive line when they played Duke. So, yeah, it's a tough task for this offense when they play teams that have legit dudes, for lack of a better term, up front.
Gotcha. For the audience, can you kind of describe their offense? Like, how would you describe it, to someone who's unaware of what Wake runs?
I've always called it a spread option RPO heavy offense. You're going to have a lot of run pass option. You're going to have a lot of, their base personnel is 11 and they will not deviate much from it. So they put a slot receiver out there with a tight end, 1 running back, and then 2 perimeter receivers. They love to bunch formations on the outside. Like they'll love to go trips to one side and isolate on the other side to get a one-on-one. And where they really thrive is the running back they've got, Damon Claiborne. He's a difference maker. Like he is the best player on Wake's roster. He's a junior. I think he's within 100 yards of having the second 1,000-yard rushing season under Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. And he's in his 11th year. So he's a pretty rare and special talent, and they'll try to get him the ball as often as they can. He's great with jump cuts. He's able to run inside the tackles. He's not the biggest running back like Mark Fletcher and Damian Martinez probably laugh at his size compared to theirs, but he's able to get you some tough yards in the middle. Most impressive thing about him is his center of gravity, and his balance is just uncanny. He takes straight on hits, and sometimes you're like, okay, he's down, and then all of a sudden he's got his center back and he's chugging for more yards. So
Yeah, this highlight that I'm playing basically describes everything that you're saying here. You see the jump cuts, and then you see the power at the end there, where he kind of keeps driving to get into the end zone here. So
he really is the perfect running back for what Wake does offensively with their running game. And you've got to be able to be patient, but you've also got to have such acceleration that when the hole is there, when the slow mesh or when it finally opens up, you got to be able to hit it immediately because it's going to close. And he's able to do that in a way that I think the only other running back that I've seen that really is excelled at that at Wake is probably Kenneth Walker III, and that guy's.
Lost you for a second, Connor.
In the NFL right now, so.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker is carrying two of my fantasy teams right now. So shout out to him. But what are some of the other playmakers on offense that Miami should be aware of? You already talked about the running back. How's the quarterback? What does he do well? And are you expecting Bachmeier to play? I know he's hurt. And also any players on defense that Miami fans should be aware of with Wake.
Yeah, so Clausen told us that Bachmeier will start. He had a left shoulder injury that he could have gone back into the game against North Carolina, but because they didn't want to risk further injury and because of how much quarterback run is a part of Wake's offense, they want to spread you out and run a quarterback draw. The RPO is obviously one of the options as the quarterback pulls it and runs with it. And they felt good about Michael Kern, the backup who's been at Wake. This is his 6th year at Wake. So they opted to keep Bachmeier out for the rest of the second half against UNC, but he should be back in this game. He should be starting based on what Clausen told us. And the wide receiver to watch is Donovan Green, and he did not have the greatest of games against UNC. He missed a chunk of the season because of a hamstring injury. They got him back coming out of the off week, and he had one catch against Cal, but it was a 45-yard touchdown against a guy who's probably going to be a first-team All-ACC cornerback in Noel Williams. So with Donovan, the ability has always been there. He is one of the most talented receivers Wake has ever had. The problem is he's not able to stay healthy. He's not been able to be consistent. I think he had the play before Michael Kern threw a pick six that put Carolina up 14 last week on a post route. Donovan just stopped running. And it's if you just keep running and run through the catch, it might be 17-17 instead of 24-10 after the next play.
Right.
He's got all the ability in the world. So he's a guy that can overcome some things when you're talking about a talent differential and star ranking differential between these teams. It's just a matter of consistency, and it's just a matter of reliability, really. And they've got a really good 6th-year slot receiver too, Taylor Morin. I think he's the active leader in the ACC in terms of catches and yards. I think he might have the edge on Restrepo. I didn't know that anybody had the edge on Restrepo for anything career-wise because he has all the Miami records. But Taylor Morin's been really solid for Wake for a number of years, and he's having a decent season. He's productive, and that's kind of where their quarterbacks look to go with the ball when they're in trouble. When they need a 3rd and 4 pickup, he's going to be one that is probably at the top of the scouting report. Defensively, Jasheen Davis is the defensive end that can wreck some game plans. They've got a linebacker transfer from Southern Illinois, Branson Combs, who's been pretty decent.
Yeah.
They've got the leading tackler in the ACC, Nick Anderson, at safety. He's a little bit of a polarizing figure for Wake's defense, because when you're I sometimes skew away from this. People that say, like, if your safety is your leading tackler, then you're doing something wrong because he's making all of his plays.
Yeah, that's my initial thought too, because last year that was pretty much the case. Well, that's 2 years. That was the case with Cam Kinchins, pretty much leading the team in tackles. So I'm on that side.
I think that takes away a little bit, because teams play with their safeties in the box all the time. But in terms of what Nick Anderson has done this year and where he's had to make a lot of his tackles, it does signify a problem for Wake's defense.
Right. What would you say is like the best way to kind of attack this defense? If you, from what you've seen, like what's the best way to attack it, or what's their weakness?
It's everything that Miami does well, and that's the scary proposition here for Wake. They do not defend the pass very well. Like they were allowing an average of 298 yards going into the Carolina game. I think Carolina only threw for like 132 against them. So, but before you go patting Wake Forest on the back for having that much of a better pass defense, you have to realize North Carolina's passing game is pretty bad. And North Carolina's passing game only needs to set up the run with Amarian Hampton.
Right.
And he ran for 244 yards. He ran over, around, and through Wake's defense all night on Saturday. It was that's the part where if you're a Wake fan and you're looking at this, you're thinking not that Miami is going to go out of their way to get Cam Ward stats, because they don't have to go out of their way to get Cam Ward stats.
Right.
You're talking about a quarterback that has a chance to win the Heisman, going up against one of the worst pass defenses in the ACC. This could be a recipe for like a 400-yard, 5-touchdown game from him. I'd kind of be shocked if he's under 300 yards, just based on what Wake struggles to do defensively and what Miami is really good at offensively.
Yeah, I can see that as well. Well, that kind of rolls into, our prediction for the game, or just kind of how we think this game will kind of turn out. And I kind of usually base the scouting the opponent episodes on what the guest actually says. And based on what you said, it sounds like Wake is going to move the ball on Miami. I don't know why, but it feels like they're going to move the ball on Miami when it comes to the zone read stuff, the quarterback keeper stuff. That's the type of stuff that just hurts Miami. If they're doing a lot of wide runs, that has kind of hurt them all season long. Runs outside of the tackles, jet sweeps, things of that nature. And, I've heard, I'm not sure if this is absolutely true, because, Cristobal and his staff keeps injuries very close to the vest. But I heard that maybe their starting linebacker, Kiko Manoa, could be a little banged up. And, they're already banged up at defensive back as well. So I could see them being susceptible to the run, especially with what you described with their running back. They had trouble with Jamal Haynes last week or 2 weeks ago. And he was just in the game for I want to say the first quarter, maybe. Yeah. So I see that happening. So it sounds like this game is going to be somewhat of a shootout, at least in the first half. And then maybe Miami kind of takes over with maybe a turnover or something to really kind of extend the lead. But I think this is going to – I wouldn't be surprised at one bit if Wake scores like three to four times in that first half, just based on what this Miami defense has kind of shown us in these ACC games in particular. So, with that all being said, I still think Miami wins. I think Miami wins, puts up 40 or so points here, back to their average, I guess you could. Well, at their average, they're averaging, I think, 41.2 per game. So I think they'll score about that. And then Wake, I could see them scoring 20 points. Maybe a little bit more, maybe 24. So I'm looking 42-24 type of game, just because of what I've seen from this Hurricanes team defensively for the past, few weeks. What say you?
I'm with you. Like I'm shaking my head and nodding with a lot of what you're saying. Maybe I'm too harsh on Wake's defense. Maybe I think too highly of Miami's offense. I don't know if that's possible, though. I kind of think Miami gets to something like 56 points. And I do think I like the number 24 for Wake's scoring. So me something in the ballpark of like 56-24. And probably a lot closer in the first half than comfort for Miami fans. One thing to throw out, like Wake did get blown out in the final scores against Clemson and Ole Miss, but early in the third quarter against Ole Miss, it was a 17-point game, and Wake had a first and goal. So that wasn't a blowout until the last maybe quarter and a half. And the Clemson game, I think, was like 7-7 or maybe 24-14, something like that. And then it fell away. So Wake has shown that they can hang with these types of teams at least somewhat.
Yes.
They can't sustain it for 60 minutes, but they can be there and be competitive for a short burst.
Yeah, yes, that's definitely what I expect to kind of happen here. I know Miami's obviously going to be motivated. It's their final home game. The seniors, they're really sending away, and will be their last game at Hard Rock Stadium, including Xavier Restrepo, who's now a legendary player at Miami, Cam Ward, who also may be a legendary player at Miami, or ever to play at Miami, including some others that, that